piece. Zero, he just has to dive on in. Zero's been the hero. That's it this time. Rise Nation with the victory.
Alrighty, what is up, everybody? Welcome to episode 19 of COD Talks. I am your host, Furs95. Very special episode today. I am finally joined by a guest. I have TacticalRab on with me. Say what's up to the people, sir.
Oh, what's up, guys? Nice to be on the show. Big fan. Watch it when I can.
We got a European
nice to share some thoughts, you know?
Yeah, I'm excited. So, obviously, the big thing on today's agenda is going to be going over CWL Anaheim, which took place over the weekend. Hopefully, most of you guys were able to watch. There were just a ridiculous amount of good matches. Anaheim never disappoints. It's probably the most iconic event every year outside of champs, obviously. The crowds are always insane. It's just a great location for COD tournaments. And this weekend was just another classic Anaheim. First and foremost,
it was no exception.
Yeah, exactly. First and foremost, I just want to go over the results. I'm sure most of you guys know them already. But obviously, Rise Nation, congrats to them on winning it, and congrats to Gunless on another MVP. The man is he's just a freak. But first and foremost, obviously, Tactical, what were your just kind of initial thoughts on the whole tournament?
Oh, man, It was mad. Anaheim, once I was amazed actually when I was doing the weekly recap post today, the amount of highlight clips and moments. We had the hardpoint draw with Rise and Red. We had Mindfreak with a 211 to 210 win. Epsilon and E6 had a 200 to 199 hardpoint win. The event was pretty mad, but as far as the results go, it kind of went as expected, really. I expected Rise to win. I expected Red to be their closest challengers.
Yeah.
And then I guess the biggest surprises for me were, I don't know what you'd say were your biggest surprise team of the tournament, but either Unilad or LG for me. Most people probably say Unilad, but...
Yeah, no, I agree. I think that it's funny. I agree with a lot of what you said. I think that it was... As crazy of a tournament it was, the top 8, let's just go down real quick. So Rise obviously finished first, Red finished second, LG finished third, Unilad finished 4th, FaZe and Optic finished 5th, 6th, and Tainted Minds and Mindfreak finished 7th and 8th. First of all, I got to give a shout out to your European boys. 2 teams in the top 4. Has that ever happened before? I don't think it's ever happened before.
It happened last year at Anaheim, would you believe? We had 2 teams in the top 3. We had Splice lost to LG in the finals, and they beat Epsi. So apparently Anaheim's our event now.
That's awesome.
It's not very good for the viewers.
It was just a great international event. I mean, 2 Australian teams in the top 8. I know that's never happened.
That's never happened before, for sure.
Yeah, I was going to say, as far as surprises go, I definitely think, LG and Unilad were definitely surprises, but my biggest one was Tainted Minds. If you'd have told me they were finishing in the top 8, I'd have called you insane. Considering their Pro League results so far, I think, are they defeated? They might have one series win, but...
I don't think they have a win.
Yeah, but I know they've been struggling in Pro League, and to come out and finish top 8 at Anaheim, where the competition is just ridiculous nowadays, is very impressive. So shout out to the Aussies for, Mindfreak. I'm not all that surprised by Mindfreak, to be honest. I don't know what your thoughts are on them, but my quick thoughts is that Mindfreak is a team that's demonstrated time and time again that they can compete with anyone in the game. So to see them finishing top 8 wasn't that big of a surprise to me, but Tainted Minds for sure was a huge shock.
It was just so weird, the way Tainted Minds won that. Or won the games to get to that position, because they come into pools, they get absolutely smoked in pools. They lose to the open bracket team. They win 3 maps in pools. They lose to everyone. They win a map off Red, which is a search. They win a map off E United, and then they lose. They lost to Ghost as well. I don't even know if they won a map against Haggis team, and then they go into losers and they beat out Regal, whoever they were. Then they beat Epsi in a game 5. They somehow 3-0 Envy. Then they 3-0 Echo Fox back to back. What is going on?
That is where it started with that Envy match.
How did they hit that kind of form?
insane.
They're literally getting shit on all tourney, and then
they just turned it on in that losers bracket. I don't know what it is about European teams, man. Red Reserve is always making those crazy loser bracket runs. It's resilience. It's really impressive when your confidence is
Red made
low
that
like
run
that.
at Atlanta, and fortunately this time we didn't have to do it. But man, like if we'd have won that winners bracket final.
Oh man, we'll get into Red Reserve here. In just a
we'll
minute,
get into that. Mind Freak, just quickly touch on that. I mean, they had a pretty impressive tournament. I was impressed by them in pools. Like they went 3-1 in pools. Like who did they beat here? They beat EG. They beat EG and Echofox both in game 5s.
Yeah,
they took down
right.
Elevate.
It feels like pool play was ages ago, but yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
that pool
and they beat Mind Freak in a
pool.
game. They beat Splice in a game 5 as well to get a top 8 place in. So I mean, their game 5 S&Ds were. That's one thing I'm really impressed by in this team is their resilience. Like I was standing behind them at Birmingham. They got absolutely destroyed in a CTF, and then they just like shook it off, like bump fist, and then they just went again in the next map and won it. And like
that's really impressive. Really impressive to do that. I have the stats pulled up here real quick. So Mind Freak's KD's ratios were Buzzo had a 0.94, Dens had a 1.2, Fida had a 0.94, and Shocks had a 1.23.
Yeah, their team is just crazy. Shocks and Dens are legitimately world-class players. Like they could get on. Like I honestly wouldn't be surprised if they moved to North America, or because they had that opportunity to do it with Cloud9, remember, right? Like last year, and they turned it down apparently. But like they're just a class above Fighter and Buzzo. Like Buzzo has been decent, and Fighter is, I guess, the same. But like those two are literally superstars.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think Dens and Shocks.
So many teams, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I think those two, they definitely deserve to. Well, obviously they're in the Pro League, but like I just feel like their talent's almost getting wasted with this team. Like they are consistently putting up numbers throughout Pro League, throughout tournaments, and it's just I don't know. I think you're right. I think the only real possible option is to move to North America, just because obviously that's where the talent is. But I don't know. I don't know what you do if they're ready for that type of commitment. But I'd sure like to see it. Yeah,
exactly. I think it's an interesting one because, if COD goes 5v5, then who knows? You know, I mean, people have been talking about it.
That's an interesting conversation that I want to save for an episode, but I would love to get into it. I have a lot of thoughts about COD going 5v5, but we'll stick to Anaheim for now. And
two things we've got to cover before we move on from the standings. We've got to talk about EG and Envy.
Yes, I agree. Those are probably, would you say, two biggest disappointments of the tournament?
Well, I mean, EG especially.
I'm trying to think who else kind of disappointed. I guess Splice was outside the top 8, but they've been wildly inconsistent this whole year. Let's see who else.
Yeah, I mean,
as far as he had Rise, Red, LG, ULAD. I don't know. I mean, Optic was. I have a lot of thoughts about Optic. I don't know if you're aware, but I am an Optic fan, so I am biased. But I guess let's just get into Optic for a little bit here. You know. It's so frustrating to see them continually struggle throughout bracket play throughout this year, because for the longest time throughout their dynasty, they were a team that only got better as the tournament goes along. And they were having struggles on Fridays, and then it's like it's okay, they'll brush it off, they'll come back and because they only get better. But now it feels like it's the opposite. They have great pool plays, and then they just come into bracket play, and I don't know if it's a mental block at this point, but it's frustrating to watch because, again, I think Methods in particular, I got to give a huge shout out to Methods. He played phenomenal the whole weekend. He's probably one of the only reasons Optic made it as far as they did in losers bracket. Again, I think Scump and Krim in particular, I don't know. I'd love to hear your thoughts on, I guess, where do you think things went wrong for Optic?
Oh, man. Their Fridays are so good, as you say, but you always have to take their pool play with a grain of salt because they go in and they destroy everyone, usually. That's what I thought when CWL Seattle when they lost in pools to Envy, that's when I knew like this is over for their team. Like there's no way if their team is losing in pools to Envy, which never happens, I knew that roster was going to break up like as soon as they lost that series. And then here, they come out, they go 4-0 as usual. And then I was honestly amazed at how like LG beating them. To be honest, I did not expect that to happen one bit. I mean, I guess I didn't take a big enough grain of salt with the pool play situation. But I mean, LG played great, and then Optic go down to losers. And so far this year, like once Optic have gone to losers, they just get eliminated straight away. Like they lose full or something's going on. Like they realize they can't win the event and they just get 3-0'd. But this time they took out E United. Then who did they take down next? They took out E United. Then they dealt
Tainted
with
Minds, I believe.
Tainted Minds. Yeah. See, okay. So took down Tainted. Like you can't really say much about that. And then they're playing Unilad. Like what I find amazing about this series is this is like for top 4. If they win this game, Optic have a chance at actually winning it. And like they go game 5, okay, but the 4v3 bomb down. I know this will make you feel bad.
Oh man,
don't really want to remind you, but 4v3 bombs down on the A site, and just so many mistakes. I'm just amazed that a team with Crim6 missed a game 5 himself. Absolute veterans of the scene lose to like 19, 20-year-olds who like they're the ones who should be getting nervous and making mistakes. I don't understand what's happening to Optic. Like I don't really want to make a CSGO analogy, but in CS, there's the FaZe Clan team has quite recently, in the last few months, have had problems choking big tournaments. Like they make it to the final and then they lose, and they're a better team. And individually throughout their careers, they've been incredibly good clutch players. But then for some reason, it seems like this way with Optic, like when you put the cogs together, there's still an underlying issue in that team. And I just think if you can't beat Unilad, and it's not a good sign,
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, as much as I'd say it's I almost have a loss for words. One thing I will say is everyone's giving Scump a bunch of crap for making that infamous now push through the smoke, which was a bad play. I mean, there's no doubt about it. But again, I guess I'm hesitant to like firmly call it a bad play because, for all we know, maybe Crim told him to push through the smoke. I haven't heard any of the team. Like, I guess we'll see on the next Vision, I assume, but we haven't seen any of them actually comment about what really went down in that round 11. But clearly a lack of miscommunication at the very least, right? I mean, like you said, 4v3, bomb down. There's no reason to lose that. I mean, just none. But I think some of that, not to make excuses, but some of that is probably due to the fact that these guys haven't been playing together for that long. Let's not, this is still a new roster. This is their first major LAN. Not saying it's excusable, but mistakes like this are going to happen when you make a roster change of this magnitude. And everyone's saying Scump shit the bed. Scump had a 1.17 in S&D throughout the tournament. Now I know a lot of that is a bit inflated due to the pool play, but it's not like they were playing slouches in pool play. They were playing Splice, Complexity, who else, and Envy. Those are all pro league teams. So I think it's. Scump's getting scapegoated a little too much in my opinion. Crim's getting scapegoated a little bit. I think it was just a lack of sort of being on the same page, between all 4 of them. And, again, these are mistakes that shouldn't happen, but the best you can do is just hope that they don't continue with these mistakes, right? Learn from your mistakes, correct them, go back, watch VODs, stop ego challenging. It feels like the basics, but they got to be reminded. It's so, like you said, it's so weird. And I think that CS phase comparison is very, it's a good one because when you have veteran players of this magnitude making mistakes like that, you just don't have a whole lot to say. It's like watching LeBron do something that J.R. Smith did in the NBA Finals. It'd be like LeBron doing it. It's like it's just, I don't know. It feels like it's a mental block, at this point, they know better. It just feels like it's just a lack of focus. But enough of Optic. I'm done talking about Optic. Move along. So the next, let's see. I guess we'll get higher up in the placings. I guess we can just let's touch on Unilad, because Unilad, like we touched on earlier, it was arguably the biggest shock of this tournament. I think what are they in Pro League? They're about, I think, sitting around 500. They've looked pretty good in Pro League.
They're 5-2.
Oh, you're right. They look good in Pro League, but I'll be the first one to say I did not expect them to carry this into a major LAN. I was definitely a doubter, but they completely proved me wrong. What were your thoughts on Unilad?
I mean, Unilad is such an interesting team for me because they formed. The rumor is that Scraps leaves for Red Reserve, and Tommy was obviously gets kicked from Splice. And the way apparently it went down was that Tommy was approached by Unilad because Splice were considering picking up Scraps, or at least Scraps was considering going to Splice. Right. So Unilad approached Tommy as if to pick him up. But then Red Reserve made Scraps an offer. Red Reserve, made Tommy an offer, and Tommy decided he was going to consider that. And like he said, the Unilad guys, like, I've got another offer I'm going to consider. And they took that. Apparently, this is Tommy's words from what I've listened to. The Unilad guys decided, well, if he's considered enough offer, he doesn't want to team with us, so we're going to pick up Zed. And then what ended up happening was Red then made an offer to Scraps, then he joined there, and then Tommy's left without a team. So it's very interesting because when this roster was formed, like the majority opinion was that Tommy would have been a better pickup than Zed, right? Experience, talent, he can guide like the young guns, all that stuff. And maybe the roster still would have been good, but I don't think it would have been. Sometimes you get this combination of young players, kind of like the Hyper Games team in Black Ops 3, and just the teamwork just clicks, and for some reason they don't seem to need a leader. I think maybe Shawnee's acting in that role, but like they have a great AR talent in Ruskin. Alex has really proved to be a sick player. And,
I agree. You look at their stats though, and so their KDs for Anaheim were Alex had a .97, Shawnee had a point. And it's funny. You have 3 players with negative KDs, so that just shows me that these guys know how to play the game. I mean, they have a great understanding of the game. It's kind of like Red Reserve's Hardpoint, right? Red Reserve gets outslayed all the time in Hardpoint, yet still wins most of those games. So that just shows me that they have a fundamental understanding of the game. They seem to work really well together, like you said. Their chemistry is already great. And I think,
it's amazing.
I guess the question that I want to propose about Unilad is where's the ceiling for this team? Because I think they've looked great so far, obviously, but do we really think this team has potential to win a major LAN?
You see, with Rise looking the way they look right now, I don't think it's possible. And I want to say that because they're a young team lacking experience, when they get in the high pressure moments, it's unlikely they're going to succeed. But I mean, they've pulled it off against Optic, so it's difficult to say. But as for winning a major LAN, I don't really think it's feasible. What I have been really impressed with though is their CTF. At the start of the year, Unilad with Scraps was probably the worst S&D team, or CTF team, I've ever seen. They were constantly getting blown out. You might as well write it off. And then for some reason, something clicked, even with Scraps in the team. And they have been like a really solid S&D, I keep saying S&D, really solid CTF team. Like they've played Optic twice now, once in the league and now here. And they've yet to concede a flag to Optic. They won 3-0 on Ardennes in the Pro League. Then they won 4-0 on Flak Tower here. So for some reason, their CTF is great. And that's like a real stepping stone. Like their S&D is also solid, but if you can consistently be winning CTF maps, like if I was any top team, apart from maybe Rise, I'd be scared to play them on Ardennes CTF, which is probably their best map. And then Optic vetoed it, I think, went to play Flak Tower and got destroyed anyway. And that's one of Optic's best maps. So like Unilad have a real strength there, but I'm not sure if they quite have the slaying power. Like Waskin's great, and Alex has been phenomenal, and Shawnee with the bar in his hands has put on some absolute performances on like Valkyrie and Docs. But like Zed has also been quite impressive. But I think if they want to really be a top team, they need a sub player that can put up like 1.05s and above. You know what I mean? Like that's going to be the next step for them, I think, unless Shawnee picks it up. But like, I don't really see that happening, and I don't think they'll place higher than top 4. And with LG looking good again, I don't know if they'll beat them second time round. I'm still a little bit skeptical. I think they definitely overperformed in this tournament. I don't think they're a top 4 team in the world. But I mean, we'll have to see. They keep surprising me.
You're right. I agree there when you said. I think that ultimately, mainly with the way Red and Rise are looking, I just don't think they can keep up kill for kill with a team of that caliber. But, you know, who knows? I mean, if you'd have told me that they were placing top 4 this event, I would have called you crazy. So, and I think you make a really good point about their CTF too. We looked, I mean, from the other end of the spectrum, look at Optics CTF. Their CTF completely costed them in the 2 series that they lost. So CTF in general it's a crucial game mode. I know it obviously is the only game mode that gets played once, but you look at all the time. I mean, Red and Rise's CTF are so good that apparently they don't even scrim them, which is, I mean, I'd love to get your thoughts, but my initial thoughts on that is like, okay, like the second I hear that, it sounds insane, right? Why would you not scrim it? I mean, you're just, you're holding away strats or whatever, but it seems to be working for them. So I can't knock them too hard for it. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, I don't like it, first of all. I think you should be practicing every game mode, but to some extent, CTF is relatively simple, and it's very team-based, and it's all about communication. Like, everyone understands that you push, like, you set up in this position, you push this side of the map, like say on Ardennes, you have a guy ice, this is attacking on the bad side. You have a guy ice, you get a couple kills, you get your guy to push through ice, force the spawns out towards cabin. Like, everyone understands how to pull on both sides. So, and to some extent, when they go for a listening with Rise Nation, I am unbelievably impressed with the communication out of Gunless and Looney, like the whole lot really. TJ's communication isn't great, but the rest of the guys seem to have it nailed down.
No, I agree 100%. Ultimately, I think you are right that it is in the end probably dumb not to scrim it like at all. I don't know if they like literally aren't scrimming it online or like on land, before a match or whatever, but I gotta believe they're at least scrimming it some. They're just maybe not doing it online or something. I don't know. They are not very vocal about that, but you are right again.
I mean,
also
Reserve, right? Like, on Doc's CTF, just absolutely wiped the floor.
Oh
like,
man,
they were literally wrecking everyone. They beat United 11-2 on that map. Like, what is going on? Zero was just 2.5 KD. Like, I mean, if he had an 18 kill streak on that map against Tainted Minds, like, if they're not scrimming it, like, Jesus, you know what, like, the quote is, like, winning is teaching, losing is learning, whatever. I guess if you're so good at a map, do you really want to scrim it against the top teams? Because they're going to be like, oh, Zero likes to flank through second hill there. If you're so good, kind of like the Splice Halo team. I don't know if you watch Halo much. I don't at all. But I watched the World Championship, and their Halo team, they don't scrim anyone. They play 2v2 Halo on like private servers.
Hear about that.
And
they just play super fast or something, and no one can even.
No one can beat him because no one knows how to beat him because you don't get the chance to play him. I
watched them beat Optic's former roster. Which
exactly.
Was, heartbreaking, but it's just funny. I think I think there's probably a case to make that if you're Red or Rise, you don't want to scrim other top teams such as LG, Optic, maybe because of what you just said, obviously, is because you're allowing them to learn your tendencies. But I don't really see the harm in scrimming maybe lower tier teams, like for rise to scrim, complexity or something along those lines, because again, it's like the game mode is only it's not that complex. I mean, we're talking Call of Duty here. Let's be honest. There's not a ton of mind-bending strats or anything that you're going to give away, especially in a respawn game mode like CTF. So I don't really see the harm in scrimming like lower tier teams, but I think there might be a point to be a case to be made for not scrimming teams that you really feel like are a real threat, and you don't want to give them any sort of little edge with regards to tendencies and stuff like that. But I don't know. It's an interesting sort of perspective. I've never even heard of teams not scrimming game modes until this year. So I guess with that said, guys, I guess let's just get into the finals. The placings, like we said. I mean, FaZe, obviously, not much to touch on with FaZe. They played pretty well. Zuma, I guess, is the only real thing to talk about. Had by far his worst event. I think his overall KD was like a 0.87. Yeah, it was a 0.87, which, I mean, again, by far his worst event of the year. As we go down the line here, Attach actually had a 1.16, Priesta with a 0.96, and Replays with a 0.95. So, I mean,
Attach is playing the flex now, right?
That's correct.
So their team.
Yeah, I didn't think he would. I mean, he definitely overperformed because he did not look good in Pro League ever since he made the role change. But I didn't get to watch a ton of FaZe's matches.
I didn't think they were good value for their placing. I'm not gonna lie. I was not impressed with, like, they reverse swept E United, which it seems like anyone can do. They won a game 5 round 11 against E United.
Yeah,
they lose to Red 3-1. They beat Tainted Minds, and then they win another game 5 against Ghost. Then they drop it. Do they come second? Yeah, they come second in the pool. They get 3-0'd by Unilad. Then they beat TK 3-1, which is like, okay, that's a respectable win. But TK's a weird team. They come out and 3-0 rise right at the start, and then they end up losing to E6, who come out of pools. So, FaZe beat them, but that's not the best result I've seen. And then they beat Mindfreak in a game 5 before getting 3-0'd by LG. So if you look at the teams they beat, I really wasn't that impressed with them for their placing.
Stiff competition, yeah. No, that's Again, I only got to see a few of their pool play matches, and they just look kind of like the same old FaZe. I hate to bag on them too hard because, again, they've won a major tournament this year. They won Stage 1 playoffs, but it's largely an outlier. Maybe they'll prove us wrong, but they just seem to be too inconsistent.
I don't think they've got any potential to win another tournament, to be honest.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Especially, you can't have, especially with Zuma having a 0.87, you definitely have no potential with your star player having an event like that. I don't expect that to continue, but.
You look at Rise, right? The best team in the game. What are they doing right? They have an absolutely dominant AR and slasher. They have the best player in the game, in my opinion, Gunless, as the flex. You have Looney is criminally underrated in my. He pulls the team together in terms of the leadership, and I think a player like Slasher needs a player like Looney, like another big personality, kind of like JCap, to kind of crunch heads with in a way, rather than Envy, who's like the speaking, things get out of control. And then you got TJ, who I think is definitely the most replaceable on the team. But he's still a good talent with the SMG. And you look at FaZe compared to that. You have Replays, who's definitely a below average AR player. Priesta was really good on the flex, but apparently they're changing that around. And FaZe has a completely different team dynamic to what Rise Nation has.
Oh, 100%.
And unless Zuma is going off, which, his play style does not imply that he is going off. He can have events like this where his mindless aggression is getting punished. He's definitely
a high risk, high reward type player.
Yeah, for sure. I think Zuma's an interesting play style because when I watch him play, he plays like nothing like I'd want to play. He just runs at everything. He pushes out every single cut. Even if he's weak, he'll challenge a gunfight that he should be losing, but he has the gun skill to win it. And I think maybe teams are catching on to that and are realizing, okay, guys, just slow down. Zuma's just going to run into our bullets. And they still place top 6, but I don't think they're good value for that placing.
Yeah, again, and like you pointed out, that the teams they went through, I mean, not the best teams that they had to go through, but I guess let's keep going. We got to touch on LG, of course, before we get into the finals. I mean, LG with the top 3 placing. I know this was a surprise to a lot of people, but I will say that in my predictions, I didn't have them in the top 8, but so I don't want to come off as too much of a hypocrite, but I was not all that surprised by this, to be honest. I think it was only a matter of time that this roster was going to have a placing like this. It was just, me and obviously most of us weren't expecting it to be this soon, but you look at this roster, you look at the talent on this roster. I mean, these are guys that are veterans, that are winners, all 4 of them, and it was only a matter of time before they put it together. And Formal again is just, he's back. I mean, he's 100% back. He had himself a great event. Let me find his KD real quick. He had a 1.12. JCap had a 0.99. John had a 1.11, and Slacked had a 1.01. So, I mean, down the line, Formal and John are going to be a scary duo for a long time, I think. What were your thoughts on LG?
Well, I mean, LG, again, a very interesting situation because they make the roster change like Optic do. And I know you were talking earlier about Optic, they still have kinks to iron out, which obviously is true. But Optic started off really hot with the new roster. Like, they were smoking everyone in scrims. They start off 4-0 in the Pro League. And like they smash LG, and everyone's like, wow, contenders for best team in the game of Rise Nation. LG started off the complete opposite. They're not even in the top 4 right now in Division B. They're 3-4 with a 50% map win rate, like 14-14. So, but some teams take a little bit of time to get it together, and they took a little bit of time to get Formal into, I guess, mold him into how JCap wants to organize the team. And, we're coming up to champs, and you know what JCap's like at champs. So obviously we expected the team to improve. I was surprised they did as well as they did. If I look at the pools here, LG, so they beat everyone in the pool apart from Rise. They lost 3-1 to Rise, which obviously was a respectable loss. They go into the bracket. They take down Optic round 1, which I was very impressed at. And then they lose to Red.
Off that series. That was a tough one to watch as an Opt fan. Not gonna lie.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and if you look at the people they lost to the whole tournament, they lost to Red twice and Rise once, right? Those were like, they lost to Red.
Did they lose to Red twice? In bracket? Oh, they did. And Paul, you're right.
Yeah. So they lost to. Oh no, they didn't lose to Red. Sorry, they. Where am I looking? Well, they did lose to Red. Okay. I'm losing my mind. Yeah, they did. They must have done. Yeah, they lost to Red twice. They lost in the semi, again in the final bracket. Yeah. So they lost to the 2 grand finalists. That's the only teams they lost to.
Yeah, that's, I mean, again, exactly like you said, they lost to the 2, right now, the 2 best teams in the game. I mean, pretty clearly.
Yeah, for sure.
So, you gotta be feeling good if you're LG. I mean, that, and I know that everyone is kind of saying, obviously Rise and Red, 2 clear-cut best teams in the game right now. I kind of agree with that. There's definitely some truth to it, but I don't think LG's far behind. I mean, I think they proved that this weekend, and they're only going to get better, right? They're a new roster, and give Cap more time with Formal. He's only going to get better. So I expect LG to be right there at stage 2. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to qualify for playoffs. If they don't, I'll be shocked. And I think they'll definitely be competing for the title as well as a COD champs.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I'm very surprised with how quickly it seems they improved. But I mean, I guess you'd expect it to be up from here. I'm not sure I'm necessarily willing to put them clear cut top 3. I still feel like there's other contenders. I'm always scared of Optic Gaming. Like I can't say I particularly like that team winning, and I'm always skeptical to count them out, but I guess right now you have to put them behind LG.
Yeah,
I wouldn't say
agree.
it's
I think,
necessarily clear cut.
yeah, I would definitely say that, tier 1 is definitely Rise and Red, but I'd say like not even tier 2, more like tier like 1.5 would be
Yeah.
LG, LG and Optic are just so neck and neck, right? I mean, they're 1-1 against each other. LG won when it mattered, but I mean, again, they're any given day they could beat each other. I think United, I don't know if I could throw them in like that tier because they're just so wildly inconsistent, but it's like they've proven they can beat anyone in the game. So, you got TK you can't count out, even I mean, we're at the point in the game now where everyone knows how to play the game on a fundamental level, and it's largely going to come down to your S&Ds and your execution. I mean, simple as that, right? I mean, S&D is the only game mode where there's kind of some leverage in terms of strats. Everyone knows how to play the game, the respawn game modes. There's no secrets there. And it's just going to come down to who's shooting better, who's communicating better, and who's focusing up more. I mean, that's where we're at this point in the game.
I don't know if I necessarily fully agree with that assessment. I think S&D for sure in terms of the strategy, but I think in hardpoints there are definitely different styles that teams have. Like not everyone plays the game exactly the same. It's about who's winning the gunfights. Like Red Reserve is one of the only teams I see consistently on Doc's hardpoint, on the second hardpoint, at about 45 seconds. The other team is spawning out, so say Red's in the hill, the other team's spawning out lower docks. They're going to push around the back by the bus. And Zero, like, always tries to flank through mid-gate and get behind them. And he's like, that's like one of the only teams I've seen do that. So there are still some tricks of the trade out that you can play with. And there's definitely certain team dynamics as to whether you send a player to the old hill or whether there's still decisions to be made, which like some teams do better than others. But I take your point, I guess.
No, that's definitely true. That's definitely true. I would argue that Red is an outlier, but there's definitely some skill gap, which is kind of leads into the question I wanted to get into, which was, is there a skill gap in World War II? Now, I'll start real quick. I think that for everyone that says there's no skill gap, that's why this game is so random, I think that's largely bullshit. I'm just going to be honest. I think that, I mean, look at Rise. Look at players like Gunless and Slasher, who have been so consistently above virtually the rest of the pack throughout the entire year. I think that they demonstrate that there most certainly is a skill gap. They've been so consistently dominant throughout the entire game, really, and I just think that the reason why I think we're seeing so many inconsistent, I don't even know if inconsistent is the right word, just sort of teams like Unilad coming out and showing out, is just that I think that it's more so due to the fact that the competition is just, this is something I mention, I feel like every podcast, but the competition is just, it's at an all-time high and it's only getting better. And you can't, this isn't jetpack, these aren't jetpack CODs. You can't just solely rely on your gun skill. And I think that, we talk about it time and time again, positioning is more important. Rotating early, like you touched on, is more important. So, I think that there is something to be said that the skill gap isn't massive. We're not talking CS level skill gap, of course. Call of Duty is still a relatively simple game, but at the same time, I think that the idea that there's no skill gap, I do think is bullshit. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you entirely, really. I just find it I find it really interesting when there was a comment on the subreddit like this, or maybe it was on the Optic Gaming subreddit, like, not surprising, this game has no skill gap or something like that. And it had like 50 upvotes. And I'm like, are you serious? Have you actually watched this year? Have you seen Rise Nation be like a dominant force? I know Seattle, there was the meta change at the start with the 2 ARs coming into play, so the pool play results were all over the place. And then Rise Nation went on an absolute tear. Earlier in the year in the Pro League, they won like 13 series in a row on LAN. Here they walk away with another tournament. Like, Red Reserve topped their division after the first 2 weeks. Rise Nation topped the division. Guess what? 2 teams match up in the final. Like, I mean, the placings in this tournament are pretty much as you would expect, apart from a few outliers, which is what you get at every single tournament. Like, it's very difficult for people to prove, say, that the difference is there's no skill gap compared to just very high competition and certain teams preparing for their opponents much better than others. Now, I agree with the statement, which is like there's not as much skill gap in terms of shooting, in terms of your pure aim. Like in the past games, the ability, like that Formal was so good at like IW because he could move in the air and shoot super well, like better than anyone else in that game. And then in this game, he hasn't been the same dominant force. Slasher is, in my opinion, the best AR in the game. Like, no questions asked. His positioning is impeccable. And communication is like such a big deal in this game. The skill gap is in slightly different areas. And I still think like this game isn't obviously incredibly complex. I think S&D actually, or maybe CTF is the least complex. S&D is probably the second least complex. I actually think the complexity of Hardpoint is something that is understated. Like the way spawns could be manipulated, the amount of questions and decisions you have to make split second. Do I go left and right? Do I play to block this spawn or do I play for the time? And there's a lot of questions to be answered in Hardpoint.
100%.
And I definitely think there's a skill gap there, which maybe even the pros don't fully recognize. Because I see some pros saying this game doesn't have a skill gap. It's all about who turns up on the day. But I think that's bullshit, to be honest. I think the teams that practice the best and the teams that prepare the best and the teams that study the game and understand the game are going to run away with it. And I think that's why we've seen Rise dominate so much. Slash is definitely a student of the game. So is Gunless, you know how many hours he plays. I think that's why you see teams rise to the top. And I'm surprised, especially the pros are so willing to just put it all down to random luck. Those are my thoughts.
No, I agree 100%. I think we're on the same page on this one. I mean, it's just so. I think I remember the exact comment you were talking about on the Optics subreddit, and it's just people making excuses, to be honest. And you just
for sure.
You just gotta roll your eyes at it. It's like, I mean, I will say, I think, and I agree with your point about Hardpoint. I think that I would say SND is probably like maybe the most chaotic random game mode, which is in this particular game, which is weird to say, but with all the different lanes and everything on all the maps, you can't watch like, I don't know, the maps in this game do play weird for SND. I will say that, but I think I think for Hardpoint, I agree with you 100%. Like, I think people exaggerate how random the spawns are. I think that they're largely pretty predictable. Like, tell that to Gunless. I mean, Gunless knows them like the back of his hand. And, you see the results he produces. So, I think the spawns aren't perfect. I don't think either one of us are saying the spawns are perfect, but there are absolutely, ways to put yourself above the rest of the competition. Again, look at Gunless, look at Slasher, look at Kenny, look at, Zuma. I mean, these are players that have been consistently above the rest of the pack throughout the entire year. And the only way you get players like that is by having a skill gap. So, we're on the same page on this. I think we've pretty much made our points. I
think we touch on a thing on spawns, because I think the spawns is an interesting question. It gets brought up a lot how bad the spawns are, but like the spawns aren't perfect. There's a lot of spawns that happen. The way the spawn logic works is not perfect. People spawn in places where it's not ideal, but it is consistent. Like, especially on, I would say, the bunker hardpoint on Ardennes Forest and the Money Hill, like the parking lot, whatever it is on St. Marie, like the spawns are very close to the hill at the back. And it's quite common. People will see, like, people complain about teams spawning behind bunker, like in that area behind bunker where the attacking team spawns in S&D during that hardpoint. But the spawns are very consistent. If you have a player in that position holding it, they will not spawn there every single time. And I see it too often for the pro teams, maybe not so much this event, but certainly at Seattle. I think it was at Seattle, maybe in the Pro League, United, they pushed up too far and a player spawned behind them. And people were saying, oh, it's bullshit spawns or whatever. But it's not. If you have a player sitting back there, they will not spawn there. You can learn this. And you might complain, oh, like, you know, they shouldn't be spawning there. We've still got this part of the map controlled. Like, okay, whatever. But the spawn logic is consistent and it makes sense. And if you learn to have a player in that position the entire time for the first 30 seconds of the hard point, they will not spawn behind you. It will never happen. And except in an extreme rare case, which I've never seen ever, most of the spawn, like the complaints about spawns I see, like, are relatively generally based on how the spawn logic works rather than the consistency of the spawns. And if you learn it, as you say, like players like Gunless and the top players, they know how the spawns work, even if they're not perfect, and you can play around them. And I don't think it's as big of a problem as people say.
No, I agree 100%. I think anchoring is what you're referring to. I think that's something we discovered back in Black Ops 2. But yeah, again, I think the hills that are sort of contest hills are the only ones where you could really, I see the argument for the spawns being kind of random. You know, for example, first hill on Ardennes. We've seen, you know, players be inside bunker.
That hill is horrible on the second rotation. You get so many split spawns.
Yeah.
That hill, like, you literally, you don't want to get initial time on that hill. If you get initial, like, they split, you should just, on that hill, you should just keep playing for old, and then the other team rotates, and then you'll just get split spawn 90% of the time. Unless the other team is being really careful with it.
And oh god, I hate that hill. I think, like I said, I think there's a case to be made for a few of the contest hills, on the hardpoint maps that are. There's definitely some questionable spawns, but I think, like you mentioned, the hills that require like anchoring and playing for spawns, I think are largely pretty consistent. You know, I'm sure some of the pros would disagree, but look, me and you have been watching pretty closely this entire year, and again, you know, talk to Gunless, talk to Slasher, talk to you know, a lot of these top players. They've demonstrated that, you know, there is a way to learn the spawns in this game. But guys,
the only map that is terrible is Gibraltar. Is just like the spawns on that map are. It's way too hard to influence them, and the hills are like too short. In that, like, say there's 25 seconds left on the second hill. There's no point even playing for you. You just need to push up and take mid-map control. And it is kind of the same thing with the third hill as well. Like, two money hills back to back on the opposite sides of the map just isn't good map design. So I think the issues with the spawns generally are Gibraltar. I don't think is a very good map. I was actually very surprised that Red played it against Rise in the second series, because Gibraltar is a map that is all about the rotations, but it's kind of about the important gunfights on rotation. I feel like some people might say that Gibraltar is it's a very skill dependent map because it's all about your rotation. So it's about how well your team's coordinating. But I don't think it's the case at all. I think that map so often comes down to like an individual gunfight at the back of the hill that wins the spawns and gives them the next 60 seconds. Like, there's so many individual gunfights which decide the entire map on Gibraltar that I feel like anyone can win it. I feel like if I'm a team like Epsilon or Tainted Minds, I'm trying to play Gibraltar every single series, because that's a map that you can take just with a few clutch kills, and it's not hard to hold the hills on the map at all. So I was very surprised Red played it against Rise, because like Red seemed like the better hardpoint team at the event to me, and I was surprised they played a map which I deemed to be so 50-50. But back to the point on spawns, I get carried away. The only problems I really have with it is, in some cases, the spawn logic is messed up, and then for Gibraltar especially, and Flak Tower as well. Flak Tower CTF is also awful.
Yes.
The map design does not allow for good spawn logic.
It's just too small. I mean, I think Flak Tower, it's just too damn small. I think the structure of the map isn't too bad. It's, you know, it's 3-laned. It's pretty flat, not too many levels to it, but it's just too damn small.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. For a 7.5 second respawn time as well, it's so difficult as an attacking team to kill a player and know where they're going to spawn. A map like Ardennes is like, you kill the guy, in 7.5 seconds, you know where your team's going to position, you know exactly where he's going to spawn. Flak Tower, he can spawn in about 6 different locations. Ardennes Forest, if you're attacking from good side, they either spawn at the back or they spawn out at Bell or whatever you want to call that, like every single time. Flag Tower, you have no idea whether they're going to spawn at the back, whether they're going to spawn under one of the guns. It's just, that map is so mad. I hate playing it, and it's a clusterfuck, really.
Yeah, that map is stressful. I cannot even imagine playing it with hundreds of thousands of dollars on the line. But Tactical, I appreciate you coming on, man. This was a lot of fun.
Yeah, well, cheers for having me. I love to thoughts off my chest. Like, don't have many opportunities to do it, and you're a good person to share the ideas with.
Awesome,
and I think we bounce off each other nicely.
Yeah, we'll definitely do this again sometime.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. I apologize for a few of the audio cutouts I had. I think that my connection with Tactical on the Discord was a little messed up, but I do apologize for that. But with that said, guys, that's going to do it for today's episode. Be sure to follow me on Twitter for the latest updates. Be sure to subscribe to me on YouTube for the latest episodes, and also be sure to leave us a rating and a review on iTunes if you enjoyed the episode. It really helps out, getting to know, get better figuring out what you guys want, what I can improve upon. With that said, guys, thanks for tuning in, and I will see you guys on Sunday.